All right. Hi guys. It's me, Pedantic Skeptic again, and we're gonna do part two of the AIG's Mandelbrot series lecture, if you will. The I went and looked at some of the YouTube comments on that video, and apparently they do get into some points as the video closes out. So hopefully we'll get to that. I did want to just warn people, if you have photosensitive epilepsy, you might want to be careful about some of the colors and the movements and stuff, but I think that we're getting towards the end of that section of the video, fortunately. So let's do this, and yeah, hopefully there's something of substance in this second and probably final part. Okay, let's do it.
Several possibilities. Could it be the man-made color scheme? Now, I told you that the colors are arbitrary, other than...
Oh, crap. You know what? I'm not driving all the way down to fucking Colorado Springs.
We always assign black to the set itself, and then we assign other colors to the perimeter to make it...
Sorry, my roommate was just texting me. We had some broken glass in our garbage disposal this morning. I don't know why. What causes the beauty in fractals? Well, it's is it the man-made color scheme? Well, yes and no. It's all man-made, and it's just perceived as beautiful.
Get easier to see, and I'll admit, I picked the colors. I think they're pretty. Other people pick other colors, sometimes not always pleasant ones, and shame on them, because, you know, I do have an artistic side. I appreciate beauty anyway. Is it the man-made color scheme? I would say no, because although I think the color enhances the beauty of these, even in grayscale, they're still beautiful. There's something about that shape that is attractive to us. We see beauty there. I think the color enhances it a little bit.
Oh, Jesus, come on,
Putting
you
a little
know.
bit of salt on your food brings out the flavor a little better, but it certainly doesn't create the beauty. I picked the colors, but the shapes are God's. Is it, did the computer create the beauty? Now, you might have said, well, the computer plotted that. But remember, we did the first 2 points manually, right? We checked it and ran it through that little form. You could plot this thing manually if you wanted to. It would be horribly tedious, but you could do it.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, that's why it wasn't until computers that people started plotting this thing. But it's not the computer that created the beauty. The computer just revealed it quickly. It did something that would take us a long time to do. It did it fast. But you could do this thing manually.
Yes.
Did people make this? Did Benoit Mandelbrot create the Mandelbrot set?
That kind of
He
looks
defined
like
that
a sloth.
formula, but did he create the beauty and the complexity? Well, of course not. He was surprised, as was everyone else. And some people didn't believe it when this was first discovered. They thought maybe it was some kind of artifact, some problem in terms of the way the computer is coding. But it's not. That's now been disproved. These things are real. The computer just allows us to view them quickly. People didn't make it. People were surprised by this result. I would say the beauty is built into math. It is. It's always been there.
Oh my God.
It wasn't until the 1980s that we had the ability to view it. What causes the complexity in fractals? These intricate...
I mean, it's just numbers. There's infinite numbers, and, you know, that makes things really complex. I don't see why this is so difficult.
Shapes that can add, and they can count, and so on. What causes all that complexity? And the fact that it's infinitely complex. You have an infinite number of baby versions built in to the original. What's causing that? Was it the computer? Well, again, the computer is simply revealing the complexity. It was already there. The computer didn't create these shapes any more than a microscope creates bacteria. The formula is not that important because you can change the formula. You still get beauty, you still get complexity.
Which brings me to my point. Couldn't he have just shown us the number line and the fact that numbers are infinite to make the same points? I mean, I don't know why A, he had to go to fractals, and B, he had to go to this particular fractal to make, you know, a fairly superficial point.
In a sense, the complexity is built into math itself. So how do we make sense of that? How do we make sense of beauty and complexity being built into math? What is math?
remember that it's our perception of this that makes it beautiful and complex. Intrinsically, it's just a way of describing numbers and measurements. It's not anything more than that until we come along and ascribe some sort of extra meaning to it.
Well, math's the study of the relationship between numbers, right? The
Yes.
rules governing how numbers.
Remember, it's something that we came up with. And I'm not saying that, organisms, other species don't count. We know that other species count. And do actually some pretty interesting things. Like there are parasitic wasps out there. Um, that attack caterpillars. And that wasp can actually somehow measure the size of the caterpillar it's about to lay an egg in. And if the caterpillar is below a certain size, she's going to lay an unfertilized egg, which will develop into a male because males don't get as large, they don't need as much food. But if the caterpillar is above that size, she's going to lay a female egg. She's going to fertilize that egg with stored sperm and lay a fertile egg that becomes a female offspring because the females need a little bit more food to finish their development successfully. Um, and so we're not the only ones that use measurement. Now, I don't think that the wasp in its mind is thinking, oh, this caterpillar is, 13 millimeters long or weighs, 6 milligrams or whatever. I mean, I don't know the exact size of these things. I mean, it's tiny, tiny, but, I don't know if it's, that level or that method, but at the end of the day, this is nothing more than a way of describing and or measuring the world we see around us. There's nothing prescriptive about this. It's all descriptive, and that's what you have to remember. Now, I'm not saying it can't be prescriptive, but if you want to say that it's prescriptive, you first have to show evidence of that. You need to show evidence of the prescriber, which they're arguing is God. Their argument is basically, hey, this God designed this thing this way, and this is how this God talks to us. But without evidence of that God in the first place, they're making a presuppositional argument.
Relate to each other. That's pretty easy. And then of course, I'm going to ask, what are numbers? Well, come on, Lyle, we know what numbers are. It's funny. It's some of these things that are very basic are hard to define, aren't they? Like consciousness, it's hard to define it without using another word that's basically a synonym of consciousness. What are numbers? The best I've been able to find, and different dictionaries disagree, but the best definition I've been able to find is that numbers are a concept of quantity. And I think that's a pretty good definition. That's the best I've seen. Numbers are a concept of quantity.
Yes.
So if you have 3 apples, the apples are physical, right? But the threeness is a concept. It exists in your mind. You can't physically touch a number. You can't literally see a number, by the way.
This is my point. Now, I don't know where he's going with this, but I'm still not seeing, A, why this is an atheist's worst nightmare, and B, what this has to do with God.
You might say, well, wait a minute, I see the number 3 there. Is that really the number 3? If it is, then I just destroyed the number 3. And poor students will now have to count 1, 2, 4, and so on, because you said that was 3 and I removed it, so there's no more 3. Well, obviously that's not the number 3, that's a representation of the number 3, right? It's a written numeral. Numerals are not numbers, they're representation of numbers.
Yes.
And we, at some point in history, we decided that shape would represent 3 things. And of course, you can use Roman numerals if you like, and they have a different notation. They represent the same concept, though, don't they? So the concept, that's not something we created. Laws of mathematics are conceptual, not physical. You can't stub your toe on a law of mathematics. You can't stub your toe on a number. You can stub your toe on something that's physical, but not on numbers because they're conceptual. So where do laws of math come from? This is the question that gets back to origins, right? Because the secularists...
So, I don't know exactly where laws of math come from. Remember that they're descriptive, not prescriptive. They just happen to be.
Try to explain everything naturally, and especially by evolutionary processes. So, but did laws of math evolve?
Okay. Evolution has to do with biology. Math doesn't, So there's a saying that math is applied numbers, chemistry or physics is applied math, chemistry is applied physics, biology is applied chemistry. And so I'm not saying there's no math in biology. However, you can take a mathematical concept and apply it to biology, and like all mathematical concepts are going to apply to biology, but not all biological concepts are going to apply to math. You can't take something that's only seen in a biological system and apply it to a lesser system, because the parts are not the sum of the whole.
That's something to think about. I mean, we find lots of patterns in nature. We find, different patterns in animals and the way animals are classified. And the way secularists explain that is evolution.
First, I want to know what the hell is a secularist. Is there a real dictionary definition of... Okay, define secularist. Person who advocates separation of state from religious institutions. Okay, so if that's what we're defining as a secularist, what does this have to do with laws of math?
They say, well, they had a common ancestor and then they evolved, they changed. Will that work for math? Did 7 used to be 3, but it evolved?
You can't apply a strict biological phenomenon to something that's not biological. Math is not inherently biological.
That doesn't make any sense, does it? Numbers are what they are, and they've always been what they are. Laws of math didn't evolve. It's not like, the Pythagorean theorem wasn't true, but then eventually, triangles came. No, they don't evolve. Laws of math have always been the way they are. Were laws of math created by people? Some people argue that. But that's a ridiculous assertion. Because if we created...
Wait, sorry, I got distracted.
Eventually, triangles came. No, they don't evolve. Laws of math have always been the way they are. Were laws of math created by people? Some people argue that.
The descriptions of the laws of math were. The laws of math themselves have just always been. It doesn't necessarily mean, just because something exists doesn't mean it was created. It was discovered. It was come across. It's descriptive, not prescriptive. The word law doesn't necessarily mean it has a lawgiver, okay? When we're talking about legal stuff, yes, but this isn't anything to do with sociology. This is just a way of describing the natural world.
But that's a ridiculous assertion.
I have a question. Is there math that applies to the supernatural realm? Because my contention is, if math is what we use to describe the natural world, there's no need for anything outside of the natural to account for it.
Because if we created them, we could have created them different. We could have said, you know what, let's all agree that 2 + 2 = 5. Now, you could imagine an architect trying to live out that philosophy. It's not going to work out well for him. Or try that at your bank. It's not going to work. Because it's not true to reality. We did not create laws of math. We discovered them. Pythagoras, right? He wasn't the first to discover, but the Pythagorean theorem, right? Now, did triangles not add up that way before Pythagoras? Well, of course they did. He just discovered it. The planets, the way the planets orbit, they obey mathematical laws. Kepler's laws, p² = a³ in terms of the relationship. Was that not true before people came along? Planets orbited perfectly well for the 2 days before people. Now, fractals, perfect fractals, the kind we've looked at so far, repeat infinitely. You can zoom in on a Mandelbrot set forever, and you will continually find smaller and smaller versions, baby versions of it. You can do that forever, or until your computer blows up. So perfect fractals repeat infinitely and are only found in the conceptual world of mathematics. Nonetheless, the physical world contains approximate fractals, things that they go so many steps and then eventually they break down into atoms, and atoms are not fractal. But let me give you some examples of these. Snowflakes. Snowflakes have a fractal quality to them. They have that 6-fold symmetry. You zoom in, you still get 6-fold symmetry. You zoom in, you get 6-fold symmetry. These little gems that God sends us from heaven every year, and we brush them off the car, and yeah, they're beautiful, and they're fractal. They don't repeat exactly, but nonetheless, the six-fold symmetry continues no matter how much you zoom in. And so it's hard to tell the size of a snowflake unless you have something to compare it to, because no matter how big it is, it always looks kind of the same. That's a characteristic of fractals. That stuff that grows on your windows in the winter. I was fascinated by this when I was a kid. Really, I still am. I think it's beautiful. It grows on your window. Fractal shapes, quite lovely in terms of the way they repeat. They branch and they branch into branches and so on. Ferns are fractal.
Not every fern is fractal. Give me a sec. Oh, yeah. Why do I have... No, never mind. This is Pteris credica abelineata. It's not fully fractal. I mean, like, it's got a shape to it, but it's not infinite. That image looks like Denstadia punctilobula, hay-scented fern, although, I can't be exactly sure just given the, what's it called, it's not, it doesn't show the entirety of the frond, so, I mean, I don't know the exact species there. It doesn't look, it's not Osmundastrum cinnamomum because there's no, like, brownish hairs at the base of each, of the little pinnae, but, there, I do have another fern. Hang on a second, I have a lot of ferns. I've got this Matusia struthiopteris, or ostrich fern. The ostrich fern, the pinnae are only once divided, where here the pinnae are twice divided. Here's another fern that has, I think, once divided pinnae. This is Cheilanthes ecloniana. Crap, I just got soil all over my computer. You know, I really...
Because you see ferns have a stem.
Fuck. Yeah, I'm not gonna just, like, carry out my entire fern collection right now. But,
And they have another stem growing.
what kind of fern is that? It's not Tritium aquilinifolium, or aquilinum, sorry, or is it? It almost kind of looks like Remora, adiantiformis as well.
Growing off of that, and another stem growing off of that, and the little leaflets and so on.
They're not called leaflets in a fern. Technically, they're fronds. You have the, frond with the lamina, fern frond diagram. That looks like Pteridium. Okay. So you have the petiole, you have the blade, you have your, pinna, or pinnae is plural, and then the pinnules. Now, you can have it be pinnatophyid, where the pinna are themselves split. You can also have a bipinnatopid, like this one here, where each pinnule is also split. You can have, apinnates, like the phlebodium. You have Phlebodium aureum here. I really gotta repot this motherfucker. Jesus Christ. I just have so many Phlebodiums. If anybody wants a Phlebodium aureum, let me know. But, this is, just, once divided. It's more lobed than pinnate or bipinnate or anything. Um, so I think the major difference between a frond and a leaf is I mean, a frond is a type of leaf, I guess. Yeah. Whoops.
They branch and branch into branches and branch into branches.
It's not really a branch. It's not really, you know, these people are not good at biology. I'm not gonna be anal about the terminology. Some of it's still technically correct.
Branches. I even found fractal broccoli, so I guess broccoli is...
That is not broccoli. I don't really know what that is, but it's not broccoli.
good for something after all. There you go. Romanesco broccoli, they
That kind of looks like marijuana.
call that. And you can see it's kind of a cone-shaped, and then it's got cones growing on it and cones growing on the cones on smaller and smaller scales. It's fractal.
That's not broccoli. That's not broccoli.
Isn't that fascinating? Too bad it tastes horrible. Coastlines
All right, resuming.
are often fractal. Coastlines, the way they branch, you zoom in on them, they branch into branches and so on. Mountaintops are fractal. You look at them from above and they kind of branch and they branch into branches and so on. Clouds tend to be fractal. They don't repeat exactly, but am I looking at the entire sky or am I looking at one very small section of the cloud? It's hard to tell because the same kinds of patterns repeat. The way lightning branches.
Yes, big deal.
Is this fractal because you have a main bolt that branches into smaller bolts which branch into smaller ones and so on. And so lightning, very beautiful, and because it has that fractal quality to it. And it's really neat too when you watch it in super slow motion. You can see how it branches out into all these different branches. That's a fractal till the leader connects and then most of the current goes down the leader. Quite fascinating. So here's my question then. Why do fractals occur both in math, which exists in the mind, it's conceptual, and in the physical world?
Because math makes up the physical world. Physics is applied math. But in addition, a fractal is just a way we describe something. Just like math is a way we describe something, and physics is a way we describe something.
Which is made up of atoms and does not exist in your mind. Right? I mean, you have this shape. That's a multibrot. That exists only in the conceptual world of mathematics. We can plot it, but you could never touch that thing because it's not physical. It's not made up of atoms. But that one is, and they look remarkably similar.
Yes, this doesn't prove God.
This particular shape here is part of the Mandelbrot set. Looks like a bolt of lightning, but it's not made of atoms. This one is. How is it that conceptual things that exist only in the mind also occur in the physical universe? This particular shape, that might look like a plant. That's actually a mathematical graph called a Barnsley fern. And a Barnsley fern is such that each leaflet is the entire shape. Let me show you. Isn't that interesting? Let's do it again just because it's cool. See, the entire shape, each leaflet is the entire shape. Fascinating.
Yes.
You can't touch that though. It doesn't exist in the physical world, but that does. It's very similar. This stuff right here, that's a mathematical graph. That doesn't exist in the physical world, but that grows on your windows. This particular mathematical shape, cones on cones, it does not exist in the physical world, whereas this, unfortunately, does. This particular shape, that's part of the Mandelbrot set. It's a double spiral. You can't see that in a telescope because it's not made of atoms. It doesn't exist physically in the universe, but that one you can see it in a small telescope. The Whirlpool Galaxy, not too far off from the Big Dipper. So how is it that math, which is conceptual, you find these shapes, and then in nature, which is physical, you find the same kinds of shapes? Why is that? Now, one answer to this, and a skeptic might say this, is, well, the physical universe obeys mathematical.
Yes. I mean, again, these laws are descriptive, not prescriptive. I wouldn't say anything obeys, but, you know, laws are just a way of describing what we see and how things work.
Laws. So it stands to reason if something can occur in math, it can occur in the physical world because the physical world obeys math. Okay, I'll grant that. But then I'm going to have to ask, why does the physical universe obey mathematical laws?
We don't really know. It may be beyond our understanding or our capacity for understanding. It doesn't mean God. It doesn't mean supernatural anything. I mean, again, this is all still within the natural world. There's no need to invoke the supernatural here.
And that is a stumper. If you're
if I grant that it's a stumper, I also have to say that it's kind of lazy just to slap God onto the, it's a God of the gaps fallacy. We don't know how to explain this yet, so it's gotta be God. This has gotta be the thing, and it's like a fucking shifting or moving goalpost where, like 500 years ago, illness is God. He's pissed off at you, so he made you sick. And then we figured out the cause of, pretty much all diseases, number of different causes, and now it's, something else, something that we can't yet explain, and it's always been that way.
not a Christian. If you're not a Christian. In the Christian worldview, I can make sense of why the physical universe obeys math. Because the physical universe is...
Let me just ask a quick question. How do we know anything outside of the natural realm has thoughts? How are you defining thoughts in the first place? And what is a thought a function of? Because, if a thought is just a function of, movement of chemicals and electricity through a brain, brains are completely natural. I don't think anybody would argue that there's something supernatural to a brain. And, we know that most animals have brains, and we know the functions of brains. There are complex things about larger brains, such as human brains, probably brains of dolphins, dogs, and some non-human primates as well. It doesn't necessarily stand to reason, though, that A, anything supernatural exists, and B, anything supernatural would have a mind or the ability to think. You're not only supposing that there's a God, which you haven't really defined very well to begin with, but whether or not this God has a mind and thoughts, what if there is something supernatural that doesn't really need to have thoughts because it's so advanced, it's beyond a need for something to fire through its brain. It's beyond the need even for a brain to enact things. Our brains serve to enact particular functions in our bodies. The brain is the organ that mediates, basically everything else. And the brain is the vessel through which thoughts are formed. What if God is more advanced than the need for that?
Is upheld by the mind of God, and God thinks mathematically. So it stands to reason
I still need evidence for this.
The physical universe will obey mathematical laws, because God upholds all things by the...
And now we have the Bible quotes. This isn't really a good evidence for anything, other than the fact that some dipshit wrote something thousands of years ago, and you know how to read it. Okay, great.
The word of his power, the Bible says, and in him all things consist or hold together. God thinks mathematically, and therefore the way he upholds the universe will be mathematical. It's inevitable.
I mean, what's mathematical about Christ upholds all things, or in him all things consist?
But I submit the secular worldview cannot answer that.
Well, it doesn't have to. Secularism is just about separation of religion and governing bodies, and being secular is just about not being part of a religion. Um, it doesn't really have, not everybody who's secular is an atheist, but, that's a different matter. Not everybody who's secular is a scientist. I know some, atheists who aren't particularly smart people. I love them to death. They are really good friends. They just aren't all that smart. They could not, you know, adequately design an experiment. Um, they could not obtain a master's degree, and those aren't the only measures of intelligence. I would be dumb myself for saying if that was the only measure of intelligence. But my point is, there is not a significant. I mean, there is an overlap, but it's not like you know you're not required to be a scientist to be an atheist, and you're not required to be an atheist to be a scientist. Um, there's just a lot of conflation here, and it's really troublesome because there are people who have, kind of messed up views of, who atheists are, and this organization is very good at contributing to some of that because, you know, unless you know better, your idea of, who's an atheist is some snarky 12-year-old who trolls people on the internet, um, looks to pick fights and things like that, or is some pretentious, arrogant, doctor of some sort. And that's not always the case. And I'm not saying it's never the case, but, you know, most of us in the atheist community have lives outside of our lack of religious identity. I will make a video on my channel of, the 80 million mundane things that go on in my life that have nothing to do with religion, atheism, or anything of the sort. Um, like, after I film this video, I have a whole bunch of, plant seeds that I've been stratifying or cold treating in my fridge that I gotta go take care of. I'm working on fern stuff, orchid grow. I have, a lot of different projects, a lot of different things that I'm doing that don't have anything to do with, religion. I'm doing things that religious people are capable of doing as well. I have a bunch of mantises and frogs and moths, and, you don't have to be non-religious to know how to take care of a moth or a mantis or, blah, blah, blah.
They can't explain the properties of laws of mathematics, why.
The properties of laws of I mean, it's like, this is a job for a mathematician. Whether that mathematician is religious or non-religious, theistic or atheistic, is irrelevant. I've had religious math teachers before. I've had non-religious math teachers before. I am not, I got as far as AP Calc. I took a couple of weeks of Calc 2 and switched classes, dropped out of that class, because I didn't particularly need Calc 2 for my major or anything like that. I got a 5 in the AP Calc exam, and, that was like my Calc 1 experience. So I'm semi-familiar with Calculus 1. That's how far I got in math. I am a biologist. Specifically a plant insect ecologist. If you have questions about, the taxonomy of Lepidoptera, if you have questions about some of the Orchidaceae, if you have questions about how plants respond to insects feeding them, come ask me and I'll gladly answer them. Don't expect me to answer things about mathematics. But any mathematician, this is not a question for secular people. This is a question for mathematicians. There are plenty of secular people who don't know a thing about math. Okay? There are plenty of religious people who don't know a thing about math as well. Why the universe is compelled to obey math? Again, these are descriptive laws, not prescriptive.
They are conceptual, universal, abstract, invariant, exceptionless, and why the physical universe is compelled to obey them. Why would a physical universe obey conceptual laws? You come up with something in your mind, does the universe automatically just obey it? Of course not. It doesn't make sense. And unless you think I'm making this up, some brilliant people have written on this topic. Dr. Eugene Wigner, who is...
One sec. Wow. Okay.
Was a PhD physicist. I believe he's a Nobel Prize winner. Brilliant man. He wrote a wonderful article years ago. I love this article, called The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Mathematics and the Natural Sciences.
Please, please, please don't get caught up on titles. You know, scientists are humans too. Sometimes we like to come up with creative titles for things. I am running an experiment now, and I might title my manuscript "To Feed a Predator" or something. I don't know what I'm going to title it yet. And often when we write manuscripts and run experiments, we change the titles numerous times. I mean, like, hang on a second. What? No, not that. Jesus Christ. That's, why do I have that? Like, reduced compsolar concatenata parasitism of New England Saturniid larvae. What do you think that's going to be about? It's going to be about a parasite, well, in this case a parasitoid, in New England, and, oh look, it's a reduced parasitism rate. They're attacking Saturniid larvae less than they used to. Jesus Christ. How about my, I misspelled Nododon today here. I think when I wrote it, it just had a glitch, but, Daytana, occurrence and survival on highbush blueberry cultivars. Okay. So, this is a slightly less descriptive title, just because it doesn't, like, you have to go to the abstract to figure out, I'm not going to scroll down, just because, I don't want this to show my phone number, but, you have to read through the article to tell, like, it's not like the title says, well, the cultivar Jersey had the lowest survival and lowest people weight, and, the cultivar Early Blue or whatever the fuck it was, had the highest blah blah blah. Facilitation between invasive herbivores. Hemlock lily delicate increases gypsy moth preference for and performance on eastern hemlock. I'm an author on this. How about my monarch paper? Jesus. I think this is just the draft version, but it did get published. But anyway, monarch caterpillar response to artificial predator cues. I mean, that doesn't tell you what the response is. It just tells you that monarch caterpillars are responding to artificial predator cues. Let me see what else. Scholar. Oops. Girdling by non-odontic caterpillars. This is a fun article. They basically, I've reared Chisora. I've reared a few leptonoides, but I did mostly unicornus. But they were, this caterpillar basically will kind of spit on the vein of its host so that that host doesn't communicate with other parts of the plant to make poisonous compounds in that leaf that it's feeding on, which protects the caterpillar from that. But um, oh, they had 11 species of nodontids. I love the nodontids. My master's thesis was on a nododontid larva.
Interesting. Now, he's coming at it from a secular perspective. And from a secular perspective, he's perplexed. It's unreasonable.
Actually, why don't we, the unreasonable effectiveness of, what was it? Not that. Mathematics. Okay, let's see. There is a story about two friends who were classmates in high school talking about their jobs. One became a statistician and was working on population trends. On the reprint with blah blah blah. Okay. His classmate was incredulous and asks, "How can you know that?" Alright. Let's see if there's a, oh, god damn it. Just a second. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Come on. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Jesus, fuck. Okay. Free submitted article. Okay. What? No, not by this guy. Jesus Christ. Not that. Oh my god. Oh, wait. No, it's Wagner we need. Here we go. Okay, let's see. Let's see what we got here, motherfuckers. Okay. Okay. We are inclined to smile about the simplicity of the classmate's approach. I had to admit I had an eerie feeling because surely the reaction betrayed only plain common sense. How do we know that if we made a theory which focuses on phenomena we disregard and disregards some of the phenomena now commanding our attention, we cannot build another theory which has little in common with the present one, but nonetheless... Let's see if I can get the PDF. Okay. Well, it's behind a paywall. Now, I don't know if AIG has access to this. I mean, they probably have enough money to buy the article if they really were worried about it. But it seems like he's just judging the article by its title. You can't do that with scientific articles.
Reasonable that mathematics should work so wonderfully in explaining the physical universe. Mathematics being abstract, the physical universe being physical. And so he discusses this in the paper. This perplexing dilemma is, why does the universe obey math? He says it's difficult to avoid the impression that a miracle confronts us here, or the two miracles of the existence of laws of nature and of the human mind's capacity to define them.
Is he just quote mining? I'm sure he's probably quote mining.
He's saying it's amazing, first of all, that the universe obeys mathematical laws. That in itself is astonishing. And what's even more astonishing is that human beings can discover those laws.
That still doesn't get us to a god.
Remarkable. Almost like a miracle. Yeah. What is his conclusion? Does he come up with an answer? From a secular perspective, here is his conclusion. The miracle of the appropriateness of the language of mathematics for the formulation of laws of physics is a wonderful gift which we neither understand nor deserve.
I don't disagree with him there. He's probably going to get into something like, well, this is a, grim way of looking at this, or, he's being cynical, blah, blah, blah. I don't see it that way. I don't think he's being cynical. I don't think he's being misanthropic or anything. I think he's being realistic.
Isn't that interesting? There is no answer from the bankrupt evolutionary atheistic camp.
The bankrupt, I mean, so I would like to know. I'm assuming he means morally bankrupt. Um, the bankrupt evolutionary atheist camp. Now, just because something is a little discomforting doesn't mean it's untrue. Just because something is comforting doesn't mean it's true. Now, when you think about nature and our capacity to perceive things and understand and this and that, when he's talking about we don't deserve this, he's not saying that humans are worthless or, anything like that. When we talk about things being deserved, we mean there is a specific reason why something should be given. If this is given by the universe, and the assumption is the universe is indifferent to us, it does not have the capacity to assess whether or not we should have an answer. When he says we don't deserve the answer, he's saying the universe isn't just giving us the answer because the universe wants us to have the answer. He's saying the universe could care less whether or not we have the answer. We don't understand it. It should drive us to want to understand it, but I don't know. I mean, like, there are plenty of evolutionists who are not atheists. There could be atheists who are not evolutionary, evolution acceptors. I don't know. But I don't think that he's making really a good point here. Even if, atheism caused people to be morally bankrupt, and he needs to define that in the first place, it doesn't affect, the truth matter of, whether or not there's a God. It has nothing to do with that.
As to why the physical universe obeys mathematical laws. But it is exactly what the Christian would expect. It's exactly what we'd expect. So we've seen that there's beauty of infinite complexity built into numbers. Numbers are abstract conceptions of quantity. They exist in the mind. Concepts require a mind.
To understand them. It doesn't necessarily mean that this was built by anybody.
And numbers are a reflection, therefore, of the way God thinks. It makes sense in the Christian worldview. The secular worldview cannot cogently account for the
Neither can the religious worldview. The religious worldview just says, well, it's God, without even having evidence of a God's existence.
existence and properties of numbers and mathematical relationships, mathematical truths. You can't make sense of it. It doesn't make sense in their worldview. Numbers existed before people, yet they are conceptions, meaning they require a mind, and that means minds existed before people did. And that makes sense in the Christian worldview. We can have that. It makes sense. Laws of mathematics are universal, invariant, abstract entities. It's exactly what we'd expect, given that God is omnipresent. He doesn't change with time. And, of course, all thinking is abstract. The physical world has approximate fractals, and we'd expect that, but the secular worldview can't answer it. The secular worldview cannot account why the physical universe obeys mathematical laws.
The laws are descriptive, not prescriptive.
It really can. And we saw some of the brightest people in the world have worked on that, and they've not found a cogent answer. But it makes sense in the Christian worldview because the physical universe, like the world of mathematics, is controlled by the mind of God. And the reason we're able...
So I got a quick question for this guy. Adolf Hitler without the mustache. If an Islamic apologist, a Muslim apologist, were to make this argument, but say it was Allah instead of Yahweh, what would your response be? Because I've seen Muslim apologists make similar arguments about how, Allah created everything, and, it's, the Muslim religion that's true because of these very same things that what is the dichotomy here that makes, Christianity more correct than Islam? If you had a point, then, everybody who believed in a God would believe in the Christian God, but there are people who believe in gods that aren't Christian gods. And so I really want to know, how would you, as a Christian, respond to, say, a Muslim who had an idea that, the universe is actually, under Allah's guiding hands, and we know this because there are aspects of this universe we don't quite understand just yet. I mean, do you, if I frame it that way, what on earth, are you going to say? And I don't want the classical, well, the Bible claims that, God, it's the Word of God. And because the Bible claims that, it has to be the Word of God because it's claimed it's so in the Bible. And Jesus was the only person that came down to earth and claimed to be God, which is not true either. Um, but if it were true, what I would say is, so what? Anybody can claim, anything, and just because they're the first or only person to make that claim has nothing to do with the truth value of that claim. Um, you know, there are plenty of times when, you know, somebody's the first to make a claim. Generally, when somebody's the first or only person to make a claim, we ask for more evidence of it. Um, and, when it comes to the Jesus question, it's, well, because he's the only guy that said this, it must be true. And it doesn't have to be.
To do science is because God has graciously given us access to some of his thoughts. That's revelation. That's what God is. God imparting information to human beings. He's done that most specifically in his word, but he does it in our, he writes his moral law in our hearts and so on. We can make sense of math and this secret code of creation that's built into it. We can make sense of these wonderful shapes being built into numbers by the mind of God. And why they're beautiful. Because God, that's the nature of God. That's what it comes down to. Thank you.
All right, well, we got through that. My apologies for torturing you folks, but, yeah, that was quite something. Um, I'm going to, take care of some living organisms, like my tree and Jack in the Pulpit seeds and some shit like that. Um, I am then, okay, why is this slow? Okay, never mind. Um, yeah, I'm just gonna take care of some things around the house. Um, we're supposed to get a winter storm any moment now. Um, so I am gonna, you know, take care of some stuff, and maybe I will respond to another thing from AIG. I don't know. Um, but let's, just, try to think critically. Remember a few things. Just because there's not an easy answer doesn't mean you get to, assert God. So yeah, until next time, thanks for tuning in.